All right, all right. Let's try another. We got a 1400 here. Black pieces. This will be our match for 1300 if he shows up. This is the chess you can keep up with. Welcome, Tim. Welcome to the Slow Show. Always wait. You know, you never know. You might not abort. You might get credit for the win. Might get credit for the win. Easiest way to gain rating weight right there. Okie dokie. Still with the black pieces. All right. E4. I will play the Sicilian. Well, there are lots of Sicilians to play, but the best ones against bishop c4 are always the ones where you play e6. Queen f. I mean, what is this disrespect? What is this disrespect here? Utter disrespect. It's not even a threat. Knight e5, I'm already taking the bishop. I mean, crazy. Crazy. Should we do this or should we go here first? I think we should get rid of that bishop. It looks kind of annoying. Takes d5, takes queen b5 check. You can make the argument is slightly annoying, but I'm actually going to say queen b5, bishop d7, take my pawn, go for it. I'm ready to sacrifice that thing because I don't believe what you're doing. He goes back. That's fine. We just want to castle as soon as possible. This light square bishop, I'm hoping, is going to run the board here. Knight f6 castle. There's like almost nothing that would stop me from doing those two moves next, right? In this position, he should also be rushing to castle himself. The reason it's so important is, well, you have your standard reasons. Castling in general gets your pieces out. But then you have to look at the fact that the e-file is open. So like the first person to castle and bring a rook to the e-file is going to do some damage. And with the king and the queen there, it'll just have much more devastating effect. So if he starts developing these pieces or playing moves like h3, you'll notice as I castle, like I'm getting my rook here way ahead of him even castling. So it's always a race to the e-file when it's wide open like that. You have to get your king out of there. I'm not paying attention to like any other moves, just bishop e7, knight f6, castle, and rook e8. I want to do that as quickly as possible. And after this, rook e8. He can technically castle here because the best my bishop can do is move like that. But still, I won the race. Bishop d6 will still be a very good move here. And now it's up to me maybe to find something a little bit better. Let's have a look. One thing I do like is I'm looking at this bishop and I want to make it as difficult as possible for that piece to develop. So what I'm looking at is bishop d6, so improve my piece. I'm also taking the f4 square. And my next thought is to play h6. Not only a useful move, takes the g5 square, and then you've got this bishop that doesn't really have a place to go. One of the most common ways to play against someone's bishop is to have your bishop take, you know, whether it's on d3 or d6, take this square away, and then just h3 or h6 takes the next square. don't think there's any reason not to play h6 here. Queen d2 is a particularly bad move because it blocks both pieces. So queen d2 is really, you know, there are squares that your pieces belong. Queen d2 is not one of them. It's just it's a traffic square. Same for me. Queen d7 would be a little bit weird. Queen d7 would be better if I developed the bishop and then did it. Then it makes sense. Same thing for white. If the bishop was out on g5, queen d2 would be much more reasonable. But with two pieces that need to develop, queen d2 is particularly bad here. However, I don't want to allow queen g5 because then queen, maybe h4, bishop f4, trade the bishops. The best thing I can do is keep the pieces hemmed in. So useful move, but also stops multiple pieces from using that square. The bishop stops the pieces from using f4. And c4 honestly looks like a very reasonable move. Play knight c3, but I would respond immediately with d4 to not allow that. Okay, so knight a3, the only developing move he could have made. So understandable, honestly. This piece needs to be developed. Bishop d7 is not a bad move at all. It stops knight b5. I kind of like it. But bishop f5, h3 means bishop g4 is not an option, but bishop f5 hits the d3 pawn. Knight b5, I admit, is a little bit annoying, but after we bring the bishop back, we're threatening to just kick the knight out. So I like bishop f5 here because it might set up a very nasty idea. I'm already looking ahead to that because I don't see any support heading over to the white king side. Queen d7 and bishop takes h3 is about to win the game. I'm telling you. So knight b5, unfortunately I do have to waste time saving the bishop. I can't lose it or have it traded. But if he goes like rook e1, queen d7. Stops knight b5. We want to trade the rooks, and bishop h3 becomes a game-winning threat immediately. So if he does anything except this, I think queen d7 was almost about to win. So a really good move in the end for my opponent, although it was his idea. We need to save this. Trading is opposite bishops. I don't like my chances. So we're going to tuck the bishop in. Queen d7 hits the knight and threatens this next turn. So we have a double attack coming. He goes d4, b4, whatever. Queen c2, doesn't matter. Queen d7 is about to be a big double attack. There's really only, I would say, one idea that seems reasonable for my opponent here. And it's actually this. Because when I do this, it's just annoying to have my pieces capture back. And if I take here, then just don't have control over the e-file. So the only annoying thing for me is the bishop goes back, and now the rooks are not connected. I think that's the most frustrating thing about the position. Now, d4 has been played. Knight e4 comes with tempo, so I'm definitely looking at that. But let's not forget what I just said. Queen d7 hits the knight and seemingly threatens bishop h3. So let's have a look. Queen d7. The knight's hit. It could move back. We could play a4. It doesn't really matter, but let's say white has to deal with the knight. So knight back to a3. If a4, we could always play a6. So the knight will end up on a3 regardless. Then bishop takes pawn. We're only really considering pawn takes. Queen takes. Now I'm hitting the knight, and if the knight moves, I'll have checkmate, unless the knight moves here. So knight e5. After knight e5, I'm quite sure that just taking it, queen g4 check, and the rook takes e5 will lead to mate. I don't think there's any ideas for my opponent here. Queen d7 is a fantastic starting move, though. Even if I want to play knight e4, or if I want to play any other move, starting with this is the best possible thing to do. So I would say a lot of us might line up these pieces against this pawn and pull the trigger. Bishop takes h3, but I'm assuming that whenever you guys do it, it might be incorrect. So what are the things that are true in this position that make bishop takes h3 so good? Does anyone know? Like, why does it just work here? It doesn't work because I'm a stronger player than you. It works because there are certain things in the position that make it work, which is why my instinct is to do it. I haven't calculated this. I know for a fact it works. I know for a fact it works. So what are the things? Because we can actually list the things to look out for. And there's a lot of really good things. So knight on f3 undefended. That's actually a really important one. So after we end up with our queen there, the fact that we have an immediate threat means a lot. Usually they have like a knight on d2 guarding it, so they don't have to react like right away. But the fact that we have an immediate threat is honestly probably the biggest deal of the entire thing. So that's a great point. Hella, the fact that we have an immediate threat. Another really important thing is that our opponent doesn't have a bishop to match our bishop, meaning that there's no bishop f1 coming. He's really weak on the light squares. So if they don't have the same color bishop as the one you're sacrificing, that's usually a pretty good sign. And of course, I would never even sacrifice if I didn't have a bishop lined up as well. That would be senseless. Like, what is my threat, basically? If I didn't have this bishop, white would just go queen f4, queen g3 after, and we wouldn't have a threat. So really, I would only sacrifice if I have a bishop lined up here. So that's a guarantee. But the fact is, once you have the bishop lined up, bishop takes pawn can still be a mistake. And then the reason that it's not here is because white doesn't have a light squared bishop. We're threatening the knight immediately. The rook is on f1, meaning that the king doesn't, hasn't like got an escape route potentially in hand. And on top of that, we just have control over the e-file. So our rook being here is quite relevant as well. It means that it can lift to, let's say, g4 to give a mate. If knight e5, we can take, and it's ready to give a mate. The knight is ready to jump into g4. So all these things being true. And of course, our opponent way behind in development. No pieces around the king. Means bishop takes h3 should be lethal here. Just has to be. Has to be good. So most resilient defense here would probably say maybe knight e5. Probably knight here. Because there's no way this is playable. If you don't take and you just like make a normal move like this, or I don't know, whatever, you're obviously worse. So have to be very careful. Whoa! Tasmaniac! Thank you for the 20 kick subs, Baz. Buddy, thanks a lot. The big 20 kick subs, by the way. We're just getting our streaming schedule back. So if you guys haven't seen us on as much, or maybe me especially, I have been feeling a little bit sick. So even now I don't feel great, but just gotta keep streaming regardless. But also our PC has been having some issues, but that I'll get better, and the PC is now pretty good, so all good things. We're gonna get the streaming hours back to normal, back to our busy usual schedule. So it's a good time to be subbed and following us. Thanks again, Bassmaniac. $95. So credit to him. I think he played best move, basically. Okay, so 95. Obviously, it has to be dealt with. I do not think that moving the queen is an answer here, because then I lose the bishop, and his queen could potentially just join and defend everything. So it has to be taken. I'm going to start with that. Now, although it has to be taken, with what remains to be seen. The first move that I would calculate here is rook takes. And the reason that I would start with the rook is because it's not more forcing than the bishop, but I will say that rook takes knight is more polarizing. So it's more likely to be completely winning or completely losing, whereas bishop takes might just be an overall good move. So I'd rather calculate the move that has a greater chance of being potentially completely winning. Like it is a sacrifice. So I would start with that. Rook takes e5. If pawn takes, then if we're just taking back, I would say I'm not so sure about that. Takes, queen g4. I'm not so sure about that either. f3, and that gets defended. So immediately I'm like, I'm not really feeling rook takes e5. I just feel like there's always f3 to guard. I'm not sold. So if I need to remove this, I think it's with the bishop. And honestly, at this point, I probably should think about my next move. But I'll do it on his time because I'm not taking with a rook. I can't move my queen. So I know that this is literally, it's forced. So I'm going to do it. Of course, he's going to take back immediately. But the point is, you don't need to have your next move ready. Now you can think about it. I have a couple candidate moves. Queen g4, of course there's f3. Knight e4, just a good move. Rook takes e5. And then maybe the last one, which is a little fancy. So rook takes e5 I'll start with. Pawn takes. Rook g5, king h2. Not really seeing the follow-up. And if queen takes first, normally I would say that that's like completely killing. But then f4, the queen is guarding things that way. My rook is hit, and there's no rook g5, which is actually really, really relevant to the position. So that's probably still good, but not so sure. Now, knight e4 I know will be a good move, so I'm saving that for later. Basically, knight e4, the queen has to move, I can save my bishop. I won a pawn because I took on h3. So I know knight e4 is a reliable move. I'm not going to calculate it. I'm going to calculate all the like sacrifices, see if I'm completely winning. If I'm not, I have knight e4 later. Right? So knight e4 is like the basic reliable move. The move that I'm looking at, apart from this, is bishop takes g2. I know that if the king takes back, I can play queen g4. The king has to go to the h file, and then rook e5 and rook h5 will be done. That will win. So bishop takes g2. Let's say he doesn't take it. Let's say pawn takes f6. Well, then, instead of taking the rook, I want to actually bring the queen in, threaten queen h1 mate. The only defense to that is moving the f pawn, but queen h1, queen takes f1. We don't even need to calculate it. We're winning. And if after this, white doesn't take either piece, then I think we still have our knight e4, let's say in reserve, plus this pawn is hanging. It's hard to even recommend a move. So to me, bishop takes g2 does win. And so I'm going to play it instead of knight e4. So the reason that it's much, much, much better to, let's say, take on e5 after we give the check is because if I take first, even with a queen on h3, then there's f4. What I want to do is force the king to the side and then take. So f4 is irrelevant because then I'm going to h5. So queen g4, we force the king to the side. And we should be winning some material here. So, yeah, king h1 could be king h2. It wouldn't really matter. The reason that I think it matters, and I'll tell you right now, is if king h2, I think I'd have to take. But then rook h5 is fully mate. So the reason king h1 does look better is because now he has moves like f3, right? And technically, well, he's still alive with queen to queen h2. So I'm looking at queen f3, just double checking. Queen f3, king g1, rook takes e5, because then that could be game over. The only downside is it doesn't necessarily come with a check. So let's say queen here, king here, rook takes, queen d1, right? Queen d1, and the bishop covers g5. The queen is offering a trade. Somehow it's just not, like, maybe I can keep going with queen h3, but you know what I mean? Like, something feels a little off. Rook e5, f3, and this. That looks pretty good. So unless I see a win right here, I'm probably not going to go for it. It looks a little risky. So here's what I think right now. I think the better computer move is this. Queen f4, rook g5. But I really believe that rook takes e5 is easier to play. Just less stress. Less stress. So I'm going to do this. Queen here could be played. F3 could be played. F4 could be played. Number of moves. But rook h5 is the idea. Queen here, check. Queen here, check. Take. Knight g4. It's not quite mate, but it's close to it. Yeah, so queen here, we don't have a choice at this point. Because although we can play queen h3, I don't think that's enough. So, rook h5, we know this move is happening. Now, queen f3 seems the most forcing, because we take, and then we have knight g4 with a check. That feels good. We could take here first, but the reason queen f3 is nice is because then the pawn can't move up. So now there's no like pawn up to give the king some breathing room. The king is really confined to this little corner. King g1 is forced, absolutely. Rook g5 would be nice, but covered, so let's go ahead and take this queen. And knight g4 looks tempting, but king g1, queen h3, ready to deliver mate. Bishop f4 shows up all of a sudden, and you're like, wait, this isn't winning at all. So the easiest win here, especially because the pieces are so poorly placed, is just rook to e8 and rook to one of these squares and rook to one of those squares. It will be mate. Bring the final piece into the attack. So rook g1 seems reasonable. Maybe we could take on f2, but I still think the most instructive is just rook e4. Okay, bishop e3. In terms of accuracy, I mean, rook e4 is force mate, right? Rook e4, rook h4, like that will be checkmate. But in terms of accuracy, rook takes e3. I'm wondering if tempting, because pawn takes, knight there is force mate. But the thing is, after rook takes, you don't actually have to take back. And it might take more moves to checkmate in that line than if I just do this. So maybe not rook e4, but rook e5. I think rook e5. Obviously both win, but I like this one on e5 a little bit better. They both do the exact same thing, but rook e5, where the destination is a light square, somehow feels just a little bit better. So rook h5, pretty much unstoppable here. This move actually gets checkmated quicker. This move doesn't do anything. So bishop g5 would be the only move. But after we take, there's a force mate next turn. But it's nice. In the final position, we've used all our pieces. We've sacked the rest. We won material. Our king has an escape square. We've got a great center. Like, start to finish, this has been a comfortable game. As I said, although it looks like you're helping, you're actually mating yourself even quicker. And we became 1300, yay. Of course, if you guys are, of course, if you're wondering, there was a brilliancy. Nice, easy chess to start off. It's a race to the E file. Bishop d6. Yeah, there you go, Bazmaniac. Queen d2, definitely inaccurate. I'm a big fan of h6 here. I think h6 is just really drives it home. Really uncomfortable position for white, so h6, keeping it simple. I think basically white doesn't have any way to develop here. And I was mentioning rook e1 for a long period of time, but knight a3 was played. Now bishop f5. Bishop b8. Apparently bishop f8 is an idea, but not for me. I need my bishop here. Queen d7. Knight a3. And at this point, bishop takes h3. It's just calling. So bishop takes h3, our brilliancy, which is interesting because, you know, it was actually a really obvious move. And here I am playing bishop takes g2, which is another sacrifice, and it's -9, whereas the next move is only -4. So it's actually quite significant that you find bishop takes g2. Whereas here, if I don't play bishop takes h3, I've still got other moves that are like almost just as good. But I'm getting no brilliancy for bishop takes g2. 2 pieces are hanging. And it's clearly the best move. What's going on here? I was actually robbed. Takes. Queen f3. Takes. Rook e8. And there's just no stopping. No stopping it. Is anyone proud of me for playing rook e5 instead of rook e4? A more accurate move? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Oh, I know. Accurate till the bitter end. There we go. Nice, nice. Thanks, Latinum. 13 subs for joining the most esteemed group of individuals on chess.com, the 1300s. Thank you very much, Latinum Blonde. Good to see you here lurking. Tim, you did spot bishop takes g2. That was very impressive. Because, as you can see from the analysis, like, rook takes e5 is a good move. But you still have some work to do after rook e5, right? Technically, they're calling it a mistake. You know? Takes. Let's say rook g5, king h2. Not the most obvious, right? You then have to find knight g4. Like, you're really making yourself work. Bishop g2 is killer. This continues the attack in the best way possible. It's really just a lights out move. But this, coupled with this check and then a rook lift, is a really good pattern to know. Because when the king takes, you strand the king over on the h-file, away from like literally every piece, and then it's just operation get a rook to the h-file.